So you would be pretty dumb to click off this video, because the next 10 minutes might quietly change the rest of your career. Understanding your own P&L the way a CFO would is the financial equivalent of giving yourself a 30% raise without closing another deal. So let me show you how. Right now, I manage a $125 million client portfolio across 34 service businesses doing $1 to $20 million in revenue. I have taken a client from $300,000 in profit to $1.9 million, and that's just the average. I have taken a company on track for $3 million net and bumped it to $5.5 million in 5 months. And every single time I am looking at the same levers in the same order. Section 1, the first lever, pricing. Most service businesses are underpriced by 10 to 30% and don't know it. The signal, high close rate, plus no pushback on price means you're too cheap. A price increase drops almost entirely to the bottom line. Every other lever has friction. The fear I'll lose customers almost never plays out the way owners expect. The conditional, if your close rate is above 60% and nobody's negotiating, you have room. The easiest way to think about raising your prices is that we want to look at first our close rate. If the close rate is 60%, we want to immediately start to raise our prices. If you have a close rate between 30 to 40%, that's prime area of where you want to be closing consistently. Benchmarking shows that people that are priced there usually have the most profitability. You can kind of go through, you look at your COGS, and there are other factors at play there, but that's really where you want to focus. So when you're looking at potential pricing, the first thing you want to look at is closing. So we go into a sales organization and the close rate is 80%. And the CEO comes in and he's like, we're at 80%, this is amazing, but I can't understand why my profitability isn't raising with the revenue. It's like we're closing more deals than we've ever closed before, but for some reason my profits are shrinking. So the very first thing we did is we start to raise those prices. So we added a 10% increase and he pushed back on it at the very beginning. Like, that is standard. It feels scary when you raise your prices. So what we traditionally do is we say, all right, go out and in the next 10 deals for whoever is your best salesperson, or if you're the owner and you're still selling, raise your prices by 10% and see what happens. So what happens usually is the 60% close rate actually comes down to about 30%. But that's not the true story. That is just the benchmark, because when you raise your prices, it takes a little bit to get settled into that new position and that new price. It still feels not quite right. So the next thing is holding that price for a while. So we don't snap back in, we hold the line for another 10 and then another 10 like that. And what you inevitably see is when you raise your prices and you do that time and again, close rate comes down to 30% or under 30%. So then we have to work through that for a little while, and then it will start to creep back up to 40, 50, 60%. So when we see that, we then increase the prices again, actually closing less, but we're making the exact same amount of money. So then what ends up happening is delivery costs the same amount of money, general and administrative costs the same amount of money, sales and marketing, you're still getting the same customer acquisition cost, you're still getting the same cost per lead, you're still getting everything kind of the same, but you're just making more money every time you bring a new person in. And if you have more overhead, and we'll get to this here in the future, or the same amount of overhead, or you need more as you scale aggressively, then this is more important than ever before. It is super simple for us to raise our prices, see it come down, and then slowly push this back up. And then we bring it up, like raise the price again into the future. We continue to raise the prices again and again and again until we get to a place where we normalize at 30 to 40%. This will allow you to bake in so much more profit into your business where it just becomes super simple for you to know every time you get above the 60% mark or above the 40% mark and say that 40 to 50 range, we want to raise our prices a little bit. Now, if that still feels scary, it's like, okay, well, let's say we go to 45%. Okay, okay, we hold it there. At 50%, that's our indicator that we raise it by 5%, or if we go to 60%, we raise it by 10%. We see it snap back until you've walked that in to a place where you just hold between 30 and 40%. If you're at 38, that's fine. If you're at 35, that's also fine. If you're right at 40 and that's where you're comfortable, also fine. But it's super important that we get clear on that so that you can get your pricing correct, because that is the first layer that we should be looking at when we're seeing a company grow and their profits start to shrink. Section 2, the second lever, close rate. Every dollar spent generating a lead has already been spent. Close rate decides what return you get. The signal, a close rate under 30% on warm leads, usually means a process problem, not a lead problem. A few percentage points of close rate is usually worth more than doubling lead flow. The conditional, if your close rate is below 30, fix the sales process before you spend another dollar on ads. Where the leaks usually live: follow-up, cadence, qualification, pricing presentation, and objection handling. So close rate is something that we really watch very, very carefully in a lot of our businesses. Again, if it's too high, we're underpriced. But if we are under the 30% mark, we need to be really focusing heavily on what is it that's causing that. So I walked into a large organization and we had seen that their close rate was exponentially low. So we were talking off Facebook ads, we were talking about a 5% close rate. So the very first thing that we did is we looked through the whole funnel. When we look through the whole funnel, it's like we have number of book calls, we have number of shows, number of no-shows, we have sales qualified leads, and then we have our close rate. So everything above the line, we had 3,000 booked calls a month. We had a 55% show rate on lead flow, which was kind of low. We traditionally want that at about a 70 to 80%. Our sales qualified leads numbers was good. And then we came down to the close rate and it was 5%. So the very first thing that we did was we started talking to trainers to start working with the top performers as well as our bottom performers and coaching them up where they needed to be. We ended up looking there first. We got them all coached up. But what we found is our bottom 20% of people couldn't necessarily do what we needed. And we were only making about $250,000 of profit a month at this time. So we rolled out our bottom 20% who were our lowest performers. So their close rate was very, very low, even lower than 5%. What ultimately ended up happening is our close rate then went from 5% to 10%. So we then started to make more money because we were giving all of our good performers full calendars, which then allowed us to close more deals more profitably because we weren't giving out the commissions. We weren't spending $50,000 per closer to actually try and get anywhere. So we fixed that. We're highly profitable. We have a ton of money. The second layer problem then was our no-show rate. So we now have more profit. We're making about $1 million of profit a month. So just by getting an extra 5% close rate, we were able to then kind of quadruple or triple the amount of profit that we were making. So what we ended up doing is, and I use this from other people that I work with, they end up giving like a free gift card to every single person that books a call. And then they say, hey, here's a Starbucks gift card for $10. I want you to be caffeinated for a meeting. And so we started to see our no-show rate drop over time, and more people were starting to come to those meetings. So we're spending the same amount of money, we were closing better, and now we worked on our no-show rate. As our no-show rate came up, we ended up closing more and more deals, and our close rate ended up 13 to 14% because we were bringing in new blood, obviously, so that's going to drag the average down. But then we were able to continue to stack this up over time. So we went from $1 million to $1.8 million worth of net income. So if we can get this done correctly, we're spending the same amount of money on ads. We rolled out our bottom performing people, and then we fixed our no-show and close rate, and we went from $250,000 worth of profit to 1.8, and it's continuing to raise. And our revenue is climbing at the same time. So as we fix these problems through our sales funnel and we fix our close rate and no-show rate, we start to see economies of scale, and then we're going to be able to see that flow through to the rest of the business and get automatically more profit. But we have to look at it and make sure that our pricing is correct, and we have to make sure that our team is adequately equipped to be able to go through that. The third level, cost of acquisition versus lifetime value. So Here's a quick definition for viewers who haven't thought about this before about LTV to CAC. Lifetime value is the profit you make on every client for as long as they stay with you. The gross profit. So gross profit is revenue less your cost of goods sold equals your gross profit. Cost of goods sold should be the cost of delivery. If your books are not broken out in a way that is revenue, cost of goods sold, to general and administrative, to sales and marketing, talk to your bookkeeping team and make sure that your cost of goods sold has all of your associated delivery costs, all of your G&A for your overhead, maybe your location, whatever, be right there. Third thing is sales and marketing, with all associated commissions, sales and marketing team members' salaries, all of those types of things. Because if you don't know your LTV to CAC, that becomes a problem. Now, speaking about customer acquisition cost, all of your sales and marketing people, including commissions, are the associated costs surrounding how much it costs you to acquire a company. So if you don't have both of those things, you can't work out what your lifetime value to customer acquisition cost is. Now, lifetime value also accounts for churn. So you add churn into that because you've got clients that churn. But if you know someone stays with you for 12 months, your gross profit on each one of those is $1,000. Well, you have $12,000 of lifetime value. If you want, you should always be trying to increase that, obviously. And then your customer acquisition cost, how much it costs you to acquire that customer. So if it costs you $50,000 to acquire a customer and the profit or gross profit you make on the lifetime value is $12,000, well, your LTV to CAC is upside down, and that's why your profitability is shrinking. So if you don't know your LTV to CAC ratio, your growth is a guess. Healthy service businesses sit at roughly a 3-to-1 range, give or take. Now, I like to see a 4. If your ratio is upside down, more marketing makes the problem bigger. The fix, tighten the offer, fix retention, then scale acquisition in that order. So CAC to LTV is one of the most important things. I have seen many companies that have a 2 to 2.5 or LTV to CAC. But the problem is they're dumping 50, 75, 100, $1 million into ads. We're just buying scale. We're buying revenue at that point because we're spending more on ads than we're generating in profit, and then our general and administrative and our sales and marketing costs eat all of our net income. So one of the things that I like to do with business owners is work out from a general and administrative perspective, what is our fixed costs and what are our variable costs associated with growth. So for a service-based business, it might be that SaaS software like, let's say HubSpot, and let's say you're doing general administrative under there and it's not a sales and marketing cost. Or maybe it's a task management software, let's say Monday or someone like that. Every time you get a new person, you then add an extra subscription to that. So it's going to stack up over time. And so you have to associate all of the G&A costs and all of the sales and marketing costs against the revenue that comes in. If you're below a 3, and let's say your sales and marketing is 30% of your revenue, G&A is 15%, what you'll find is that you will have very little profit, if any at all. I was working with a $14 million company. They were doing exactly that. Their customer acquisition cost was through the roof. The LTV wasn't tight enough. They were actually about a 2. And so they made $13 million in revenue, but they had about $300,000 worth of net income. And so if you don't get this right and you aren't watching this carefully, you can end up really looking good from a top line revenue perspective, but you're one bad month, especially at that level, away from needing debt to be able to keep the company alive. So tighten the offer, fix retention, then scale acquisition in that order, because that's really the only way. Like if you're throwing more fuel on a fire and you're already seeing chaos and you're already seeing that profitability shrink, there is a problem through the LTV to CAC. Either we're churning people out the back of the company too quick, or we aren't as profitable as we need to be, and then we look at our pricing. We look at our marketing channels that we're spending on. Like, is one exponentially more expensive than another? We need to understand what it is that's causing a problem, because it could be a delivery problem, it could be a marketing problem at that point, or it could be a pricing problem. So we need to understand what's going in or going on and bake profitability into every layer. So when you're doing your calculations, don't just worry about revenue. Bake in your general administrative costs and your sales and marketing costs to get this right. Section 4, CAC, payback period. So we got our pricing right. We've gotten our LTV to CAC right where it needs to be, so we're making a ton of money. LTV is 4 or 5 times where it should be, and everything looks amazing. And then we dump $1 million, 500,000, 250, whatever it is, into ads or a marketing initiative. Then we scale over the next 3 months, but our profitability shrinks exponentially, and we're wondering how to make payroll. Okay, so everything else is fine. Pricing is good, LTV, CAC, like we're not spending too much, everything looks great. Well, the reason is because you've dumped a lot of money into sales and marketing initiatives without understanding what your customer acquisition cost payback period is. So think about it. You spend $100,000, your LTV is amazing, and you're tracking it over 12 months or quarterly, whatever it is, and it looks good. But it takes you 6 months from acquiring the customer to actually make back the profit to gain that, like to have that customer. So what you're doing is you're funding exponentially more overhead, because every single month you're slowly paying back that gross profit or the customer acquisition cost. And if it takes 6 months, put $100,000 in, takes 6 months to get that $100,000 back, now you've just fueled your own profitability dip, because you're going to have to wait 6 months before anything starts to catch up. And the more fuel you pour on that fire, the bigger that hole gets. So the goal should always be, how do we get it so that our customer acquisition cost payback period is 30 days? So if I know it costs us $50,000 to get one customer in the door, my lifetime value is $150,000 over 10 years, let's say. How do I make $70,000 of that $150,000 in that first month? Like in 30 days upon acquiring that customer? Because if you can do that, you can scale exponentially. If you can do it in 3 months, you're going to see your profit dip, but then you're going to see it start to come back. But if you're at 6 to 9 to 12, that customer acquisition cost cycle, like payback period, is way too long, and you're going to run out of cash before it becomes a position where you can actually recover. You're going to have to use debt, and you will recover eventually as things start to take off, but we're not going to get there quick enough, and it's going to hurt all the way through that cycle. So we're investing without being able to see how long that takes. So focus on your customer acquisition cost payback period. If you're throwing more money into sales and marketing, your CAC is good, your LTV is good, and everything's moving where it needs to be, the next layer problem that you will find is that specifically. Section 5. The fifth lever, cash conversion. Profit, honestly, is an opinion. Cash is a fact, because a lot of companies work on accrual basis. You can do a lot on the books, whether it's a balance sheet, whether it's accruals, those types of things. Cash in the bank is the most important thing that we can focus on in the company, because it's the only thing that actually tells you if you're profitable at the end of the day. The signal really is you're profitable on paper, but constantly stressed about payroll. Accounts receivable is usually the first place I want to look. Payment terms, deposits, milestone billing, the levers most owners never touch. If your average day to collect is over 45, you're financing your customer's business with yours. You're effectively a bank with no interest rate. So a couple of things that we should be doing right here when we're looking at that and cash conversion cycle is we need to shorten our terms. If they're paying you at 45, we probably want to put them on 15-day terms. We require deposits. We automate follow-up on our accounts receivables. So cash conversion cycle is effectively amount of time it takes you from getting an invoice to getting paid. If it's 30 days and you've already done the work and then they have 30-day terms, you're funding and or being a bank, which is okay for some companies. In some industries, that's the kind of expectation. But as a CFO, if we're going from 30 to 45 days, that's 15 days every invoice every year that we can kind of extend the amount of terms, because that means we're going to get an extra 2 months, let's say, before we have to pay over the course of a long period of time. So every time you stack that 15, it's like 15 days, 30 days, 45 days. It kind of allows them to go into that cycle where they've kind of stretched you as far as they can. We need to ensure that those clients are paying us timely. We want to make sure that they either have shorter terms, penalties like interest if they don't pay on time, starting at 35 days, or we want to make sure that we've got some sort of automated follow-up to ensure that AR cycle is on point. I've seen customers get sweat 60 days. I've seen others that didn't get paid for 90 days, and then the other business went bust. They lost $90,000 right there. there. So our cash flow conversion cycle is one of the key things here. Otherwise, you're just going to fund their business, and there are inherent risks on that. So start watching that conversion cycle very closely, and you'll be able to see just how quickly you get money back from every dollar that you spend. Section 6, the sixth lever, labor efficiency. Revenue per employee. I love this metric. It is one of the best metrics as well as labor efficiency to track. So if you're a new business, the rule of thumb is one full-time employee per $250,000 of revenue. This is a lagging indicator as a KPI. But what you can see is if you have to have more people in the organization, then this metric, you've either got a pricing problem, you've got a packaging problem, the scope of services we're providing for the price that we have is too wide, or you have an efficiency problem in the organization. One of the signals here is that revenue grew, but the per employee number either stayed flat or dropped. You grew headcount, not profitability and or productivity. So we have to be very, very mindful of that because each employee that we have is an investment in the organization. If you're at $1 million, you should have 5 employees because you got to hire that fifth one as you go above the million. And so that's the number that you want to watch because then we can see where the efficiency problems are. So we're $1 million, we need 5 employees, we're at 7. We immediately have an issue because we're at 7, it's like, why do we need those 7 employees? Well, I can't do it because we're too busy, we're maxed out, and we've got a certain amount of revenue and the labor efficiency number isn't working or the revenue per employee. It's like, okay, so then the first thing we look at is close rate. Is our close rate too high or too low? Or where it should be, 30 to 40%. Second, are we overscoping? Are we doing more work than what we've charged for? That then allows us to kind of see that. Third thing is then, are our people actually efficient? Do we need to find some extra tools? Do we overhire on general administrative people like admins? Because the people that were doing the work were so underwater with all of these things that were out scope, they weren't able to do what they needed to chase down clients and do that. And then did we hire 3 of the admins? And we need to actually look at our processes, our tools, our role design. Do we need to look at those? So why labor efficiency? Labor efficiency improvements compound over time. It makes you scalable because it's going to allow you to make more money per employee. So if you hire people to do the work in your cost of goods sold, then you're hiring admins to help them like coordinate, do their calendars, do communication, chase down documents, whatever it may be that you've got the admins to do. Your revenue per employee needs to go up. So they need to have $350,000 because now they've got to deal with the overhead of the admins that they have underneath them. If they can't do that, one of those things is skewed, and one of those is a problem. And we need to be doing either time studies and time tracking with each of the employees for maybe 2 weeks, writing down what they're doing every 15 minutes. Yes, it sucks, but it's super important that we get that right. If we don't get that right, it's going to hurt you over time, and then you're going to scale, and then your cost of goods sold and G&A costs are going to eat you alive. Your LTV to CAC could be the best thing ever, but if you're hiring too fast or you're wasting tons of energy and movement in that cost of goods sold and G&A line, it's never going to get better. So traditionally, we do a hiring freeze, we do a time study. We've already looked at all the other KPIs at that point, so it comes back to this, and then it's like, okay, what would it take to get one full-time employee to manage $350,000 worth of revenue? Because you might have said, Aaron, that's not possible. Or, Aaron, there's absolutely no way I can price that way. Okay, great. What would it take to make that happen? Is it less scope? Is it price increase? Is it do less for the same amount of money? Or is it finding better employees that can just do more? Those are the 3 tiers underneath labor efficiency that you should be watching. It is super beneficial here because this is the thing, cost of goods sold is the thing that is going to stay with you and either help you make the company or break the company. People that get that right scale profitably every single time. So that is 6 levers: pricing, close rate, CAC to LTV, CAC, payback period, cash conversion, and labor efficiency. Run that list against your business this week Most owners I work with are losing 10 to 30% of their potential profit across at least 3 of those 6, and they have no idea. Now, if you want to see what these levers actually look like when you apply them to a real business with the real math on screen, click this video right here. I took a $3 million company running a negative profit and broke down exactly how the numbers were fixed. You will see the before and the after. I'll also show which levers moved the needle the most. I'll see you over there.